What happens when loyalty and betrayal collide in one of history's most powerful families? Princess Diana's story has captivated the world, but hidden behind her public life are revelations from her sister, Lady Sarah McCorquodale. What did Sarah truly think of Camilla Parker Bowles and her role in Diana's heartbreak? How did she grapple with witnessing Diana's struggles under royal pressure and personal betrayal? As we uncover Sarah's long-kept secrets, we ask, can a sister's love withstand the weight of betrayal? And how does Diana's legacy endure in a world she left too soon? Let's dive in. Lady Sarah, Diana's eldest sister, had always been a steady presence in her life. Though she often preferred to avoid the spotlight, Sarah found herself thrust into public scrutiny in the days following Diana's death. Her composed demeanor masked a whirlwind of pain, guilt, and unanswered questions. Behind closed doors, she was tormented not only by the tragic loss of her sister, but also by the knowledge of the struggles Diana had endured during her short yet impactful life. The bond between the Spencer sisters had been complicated, shaped by shared experiences of aristocratic privilege and the unique pressures of their upbringing. Yet, as Diana transitioned from shy teenager to global icon, Sarah remained her steadfast confidant. In those private moments, Sarah had glimpsed the unrelenting weight Diana bore, pressure not only from royal expectations, but also from a deeply strained marriage. It wasn't the fairy tale the world had been sold. Behind the sparkling tiaras and designer gowns lay a reality far darker than anyone could have imagined. Diana's entry into royal life had been swift and dazzling. In 1981, her engagement to Prince Charles captivated the world. She was just 19, a fresh-faced, charming young woman seemingly plucked from a storybook. But beneath her radiant smile lurked the anxieties of a girl grappling with the enormity of her new role. Sarah, who had briefly dated Charles herself in the late 1970s, understood the unique pressures of being in his orbit. She had witnessed firsthand the demands of royal life and the complexities of his long-standing connection with Camilla Parker Bowles. It was Sarah, after all, who had introduced Diana to Charles during a hunting weekend at the Spencer family estate in 1977. At the time, Diana was only 16, a cheerful teenager with no inkling of the dramatic turn her life would take. Charles, then in his late 20s, was initially drawn to Sarah's vivacious personality and sharp wit. Their brief romance fizzled, but their friendship endured. When Charles shifted his attention to Diana, Sarah gave her blessing. Little did she know the profound impact this new relationship would have on her family and on Diana's life. By the time Diana married Charles in a grand ceremony at St. Paul's Cathedral, Camilla's shadow already loomed large. Though outwardly supportive, Sarah harbored quiet concerns. She had observed how Charles's emotional connection to Camilla remained steadfast, despite his budding romance with Diana. For Sarah, it was a red flag, one she felt powerless to address. The royal family's traditions dictated discretion, and Sarah, like many in their circle, was bound by unwritten rules of silence. As Diana's marriage unfolded, the cracks became impossible to ignore. Sarah watched helplessly as her sister's vivacious spirit was gradually eroded by loneliness and betrayal. Diana confided in her often, sharing her fears and frustrations. The intensity of royal life, compounded by Charles's ongoing relationship with Camilla, left Diana feeling trapped. Sarah tried to offer support, but she was acutely aware of the limitations imposed by their world. Her loyalty to Diana clashed with the expectations of propriety and allegiance to the royal family. The night of Diana's death brought these struggles into sharp relief. For Sarah, it wasn't just the loss of a beloved sister. It was the culmination of years of pain and unresolved questions. She replayed Diana's final days in her mind, searching for clues, trying to make sense of the senseless. Sarah's reflections on that fateful night marked the beginning of her journey toward breaking the silence, a decision she knew would reverberate far beyond her family. What weighed most heavily on Sarah's heart was the sense of unfinished business. Diana had been on the brink of reclaiming her narrative, stepping out from the shadow of her failed marriage and forging her own path. Her humanitarian efforts had given her a renewed sense of purpose, and Sarah believed her sister was finally finding peace. The abrupt end to that journey felt like a cruel twist of fate. one Sarah struggled to accept. But even as she grappled with grief, Sarah couldn't ignore the lingering presence of Camilla in the story of Diana's life. The woman who had been a source of tension in Diana's marriage now stood poised to play an even larger role in the royal narrative. For Sarah, this wasn't just a betrayal, it was an affront to Diana's memory. The idea that Camilla might one day take her place alongside Charles in a public capacity felt like a bitter pill to swallow. Yet, for years, Sarah remained silent, choosing to shield her family from further scandal. It wasn't until much later, when the world seemed ready to revisit Diana's legacy, that Sarah began to speak openly about her sister's struggles. Her revelations painted a vivid picture of a woman who, despite her immense popularity, had been profoundly isolated. Sarah's accounts added depth to Diana's story, shedding light on the private battles that had shaped her public persona. In revisiting these memories, Sarah also found herself reflecting on her own role in Diana's life. She had been more than a sister. She had been a witness, an ally, and at times a reluctant participant in the royal machine that had consumed Diana. Her decision to speak out wasn't just an act of catharsis, it was a tribute to the sister she had loved and lost, a way of ensuring that Diana's truth would not be forgotten. As Sarah began to share these stories, the weight of her silence lifted, revealing a narrative that was as complex as it was heartbreaking. The pain of that August night in Paris still lingers, but so too does the memory of Diana's resilience. For Sarah, her sister's legacy is a reminder of the strength it takes to endure, even in the face of unimaginable challenges. Diana's story is one of triumph and tragedy, and for Sarah, it's a story worth telling, not just for the world to hear, but for Diana herself. The royal romance that captivated the world in the early 1980s wasn't a straightforward love story. Beneath the grandeur of Diana's engagement to Prince Charles lay a complicated web of relationships, expectations, and betrayals. Lady Sarah McCorquodale, Diana's eldest sister, had an unexpected role in the early days of this royal drama, one that would forever intertwine her life with the monarchy. It was the summer of 1977 when Lady Sarah first crossed paths with Prince Charles during a pheasant hunt on a friend's estate. She was bold, witty, and unapologetically herself, qualities that intrigued the Prince of Wales, who was under mounting pressure to find a suitable bride. Their relationship, while brief, offered a glimpse into the intense scrutiny and expectations tied to royal life. During this time, Sarah introduced Charles to her younger sister Diana, a shy 16-year-old with little knowledge of the whirlwind her life would soon become. For Sarah, the introduction seemed innocent, a chance for her sister to meet a royal acquaintance. Little did she know that this casual meeting would set the stage for one of the most publicized marriages in history. By 1980, Charles had shifted his attention to Diana, charmed by her youthful innocence and potential to fulfill the public's ideal of a future queen. Sarah, who had already moved on from her romantic involvement with Charles, publicly gave her blessing. In an interview, she famously quipped, "I'm Cupid," taking lighthearted credit for bringing the couple together. But behind her humor lay an unease about what Diana was stepping into, a world that Sarah herself had glimpsed and decided wasn't for her. When Charles proposed in February 1981, the engagement was hailed as a modern fairy tale. The world was captivated by Diana's charm, beauty, and grace. But even in these early days, cracks begin to show. Charles's relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles, a friend and former girlfriend, lingered in the background. While the royal family and their inner circle dismissed Camilla's significance publicly, those closer to the couple knew her influence was far from over. Lady Sarah, always protective of her sister, observed these dynamics with growing concern. She had experienced the pressures of being associated with Charles and understood the sacrifices Diana would need to make to fit into the royal mold. Yet Diana's situation was unique. She wasn't just joining a family, she was becoming an emblem of hope and tradition for an entire nation. As the wedding day approached, the tension was palpable. Diana, who had been a carefree teenager only a few years earlier, now found herself thrust into the global spotlight. Sarah offered support in the ways she could, but their roles had shifted. Diana was no longer just her little sister, she was the future Princess of Wales. The wedding itself, held on July 29, 1981, was a spectacle of unparalleled grandeur. St. Paul's Cathedral echoed with the vows that marked Diana's official entry into the royal family. Her gown, an elaborate creation adorned with 10,000 pearls and featuring a record-breaking 25-foot train, became an enduring symbol of the occasion. But behind the scenes, the weight of expectations bore down on Diana. Charles's ambiguous response to the question of whether they were in love, whatever in love means, remained a troubling moment for Sarah. It was an early indication that their relationship wasn't as idyllic as it seemed. Despite the public's adoration, there were already signs that Diana's life in the palace would not be the fairy tale the world imagined. In the months following the wedding, Sarah noticed changes in her sister. Diana's letters and calls hinted at loneliness and confusion as she navigated the rigid expectations of royal life. Buckingham Palace, with all its opulence, felt isolating to someone used to the warmth and informality of family life at Althorpe. Sarah herself had chosen a path away from these constraints. She had married Neil McCorquodale, a farmer, and found solace in a quieter, more grounded existence. Watching Diana struggle with the transition into royal life reminded Sarah of her own choice to step back from the demands of being involved with Charles. As Diana's role expanded, so too did her responsibilities. Public engagements, media appearances, and royal tours became part of her daily routine. She became the face of the monarchy for a new generation, celebrated for her relatability and compassion. But within the walls of Buckingham Palace, she grappled with feelings of inadequacy and isolation. Sarah, who had once playfully introduced Diana to Charles, now felt the weight of her unintended role in her sister's transformation. She couldn't help but wonder if things might have been different had she not made that introduction. These thoughts, however fleeting, were a source of guilt that she carried quietly. Even as Diana adjusted to royal life, Charles's relationship with Camilla remained a quiet undercurrent in their marriage. The pair maintained contact, often under the guise of friendship, but their bond was stronger than appearances suggested. For Sarah, who had always valued loyalty, this was a painful realization. She watched as her sister navigated a marriage that was already beginning to fray, knowing that Charles's heart seemed to belong elsewhere. By the mid-1980s, the tension in Diana's marriage was no longer a secret. Sarah tried to offer support, but she was bound by the unspoken rules of aristocratic discretion. Speaking out against the royal family was unthinkable, even for someone as strong-willed as Sarah. Her loyalty to her sister clashed with her loyalty to the institution they were now both tied to, albeit in different ways. Diana, meanwhile, began to find her voice. Her public appearances reflected a confidence that masked her private struggles. She used her platform to champion causes that resonated with her deeply, from HIV/AIDS awareness to landmine eradication. Sarah admired Diana's strength, even as she worried about the toll it was taking on her emotionally. As Sarah continued to observe her sister's journey, she couldn't shake the feeling that Camilla's presence loomed larger than ever. Diana had confided in her about the strain this placed on her marriage, and Sarah listened with a heavy heart. She knew that Camilla wasn't just a passing figure in Charles's life, she was a permanent fixture, one that Diana could never truly compete with. The years that followed would bring more revelations and heartbreak, but for Sarah, the foundation had already been laid. She had seen the cracks form, the quiet betrayals that would eventually come to define Diana's story. Her role as both witness and confidant gave her a unique perspective, one that would take years to share fully. As Diana's world became more public, Sarah's remained steadfastly private. Yet their bond as sisters endured, even as they navigated their respective paths. The seeds of tension and betrayal had been planted early, and Sarah could only hope that her sister's strength would see her through the storms to come. The mid-1980s marked a turning point in Princess Diana's marriage to Prince Charles. What had begun as a carefully curated royal romance was now unraveling into a public spectacle of tension, heartbreak, and betrayal. Behind the scenes, Lady Sarah McCorquodale, Diana's eldest sister, watched helplessly as her sister's fairy tale life began to crack under the weight of unspoken truths. The bond between Diana and Charles was fracturing, and the shadow of Camilla Parker Bowles loomed larger than ever. For years, whispers of Charles's connection to Camilla had circulated in royal circles, but it wasn't until the mid-1980s that their relationship began to resurface in earnest. While outwardly maintaining the guise of a platonic friendship, the pair's interactions grew more intimate, Diana, already struggling to find her place in the royal family, began to feel the strain of this silent betrayal. For Sarah, who had always valued loyalty and honesty, this situation was deeply troubling. The signs were subtle at first. Diana's demeanor, once radiant and full of life, began to shift. Her public appearances remained polished, but behind closed doors, she confided in Sarah about her growing insecurities. The knowledge of Charles's emotional connection to Camilla weighed heavily on Diana, exacerbating her feelings of inadequacy. Sarah, torn between her loyalty to her sister and the unyielding expectations of royal discretion, offered what comfort she could. The turning point came in 1986 when Diana discovered the depth of Charles and Camilla's bond. This revelation wasn't a sudden shock, but rather a culmination of subtle clues and quiet realizations. Camilla's name appeared frequently in Charles's conversations, her presence lingering in the background of their lives. For Diana, this wasn't just a betrayal of their marriage vows, it was a confirmation of her deepest fears. Diana's private torment soon began to seep into the public sphere. The media, always hungry for royal gossip, picked up on the tension between the couple. Speculation about their marriage intensified, and Diana found herself thrust into the harsh glare of public scrutiny. Sarah, observing this unfold, felt a growing frustration with the constraints of her position. While she longed to defend her sister publicly, she understood the implications such actions would have on their family. The strain on Diana's marriage manifested in her mental and emotional health. Struggling to cope with the pressures of royal life and the knowledge of Charles's infidelity, Diana developed an eating disorder. Bulimia became a coping mechanism, a way to regain a sense of control in a life that often felt overwhelming. Sarah, aware of Diana's struggles, encouraged her to seek help, but the stigma surrounding mental health issues within the royal family made this a difficult path. It wasn't until 1992 that the cracks in Diana and Charles's marriage became impossible to ignore. That year, journalist Andrew Morton published Diana, Her True Story, a book that reveals intimate details about Diana's life and struggles. Unbeknownst to the public at the time, Diana herself had been a secret source for Morton, sharing her side of the story through recorded interviews. The book exposed the realities of her marriage, including Charles's ongoing relationship with Camilla, and painted a stark picture of Diana's isolation within the royal family. For Sarah, the publication of Morton's book was a moment of both relief and anxiety. She knew how much courage it had taken for Diana to share her truth, but she also understood the backlash that would inevitably follow. The royal family, accustomed to maintaining a united front, was thrown into disarray by the revelations. Sarah, ever the loyal sister, stood by Diana, offering her unwavering support. The media frenzy that followed the book's release only deepened the divide between Diana and Charles. Their separation, announced later that year, marked the beginning of a new chapter in Diana's life. For Sarah, this was both a bittersweet moment and a vindication of Diana's courage. She admired her sister's resilience in the face of public scrutiny, even as she mourned the loss of the life Diana had once dreamed of. As the 1990s progressed, Diana began to redefine her role within the monarchy. No longer bound by the constraints of her marriage, she threw herself into her humanitarian work with renewed purpose. Causes such as HIV/AIDS awareness, landmine eradication, and mental health advocacy became her focus, earning her admiration and respect worldwide. For Sarah, this transformation was a testament to Diana's strength and determination. Yet even as Diana reclaimed her identity, Camilla's presence in Charles's life continued to cast a long shadow. The infamous Camilla Gate tapes, leaked in 1993, provided undeniable proof of their affair. Recorded in 1989, the tapes captured intimate conversations between Charles and Camilla, including a now infamous comment about Charles wishing to be reincarnated as a tampon. The scandal rocked the royal family and further cemented Camilla's role in the public's perception of Diana's marriage. For Sarah, the tapes were a painful reminder of the betrayal her sister had endured. She struggled to reconcile the public's fascination with the scandal and the private pain it caused Diana. While the world devoured every detail, Sarah focused on supporting her sister, who was navigating an increasingly complex and public life. Diana's decision to confront Camilla directly, a bold move that defied royal protocol, was a moment Sarah both admired and feared. During a party in the early 1990s, Diana reportedly approached Camilla and told her, "I know what's going on between you and Charles, and I just want you to know that." The confrontation, though cathartic for Diana, did little to change the dynamics of her marriage. For Sarah, it was a stark illustration of Diana's courage and vulnerability. The years leading up to Diana and Charles's divorce in 1996 were marked by a mix of hope and heartbreak. Diana's growing independence and humanitarian impact were inspiring, but the lingering tension with Charles and the royal family remained a constant struggle. Sarah, who had once introduced Diana to Charles, now found herself reflecting on the unintended consequences of that introduction. As Diana's life became increasingly public, Sarah's role as her confidant took on new significance. She witnessed the strength it took for Diana to endure the challenges she faced, both as a member of the royal family and as a woman navigating a deeply personal betrayal. For Sarah, the lessons of those years were profound, a reminder of the resilience and courage that defined her sister's life. The betrayal that had simmered beneath the surface for years was now out in the open, a painful reality that Diana could no longer ignore. But as Sarah would later reflect, it was also the beginning of a new chapter for Diana, one where she would reclaim her narrative and redefine her legacy, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. The early 1990s marked a pivotal shift in Princess Diana's life, as the world saw her transform from a shy, restrained royal figure into an independent, outspoken humanitarian. The years of tension and heartbreak in her marriage to Prince Charles had culminated in a separation that was as public as it was painful. For Diana's eldest sister, Lady Sarah McCorquodale, these years brought a mix of relief and sorrow. She had witnessed Diana endure a marriage fraught with betrayal, and while the separation offered her sister a path to freedom, it also exposed her to new challenges. By 1992, Diana was no longer just the people's princess. She was a woman in transition, navigating the complexities of life outside the confines of a royal marriage. For Sarah, this transition was bittersweet. While she admired Diana's determination to carve out her own identity, she was acutely aware of the intense scrutiny her sister faced. Every decision Diana made, from her choice of charity work to her personal relationships, was dissected by the press. It was a level of public attention that few could endure, and Sarah worried about the toll it might take on Diana's well-being. One of Diana's greatest challenges during this period was reclaiming her sense of purpose. Stripped of the traditional duties that came with being the Princess of Wales, she found herself at a crossroads. Sarah, ever the supportive sister, encouraged Diana to focus on her passions. It was during this time that Diana truly came into her own as a global humanitarian. She championed causes that were often overlooked by the royal family, such as HIV/AIDS awareness and the fight against landmines. For Sarah, watching Diana find her voice was a source of immense pride, even as she remained concerned about the pressures her sister faced. The media's relentless fascination with Diana's personal life, however, threatened to overshadow her humanitarian efforts. Stories of her romantic relationships and alleged feuds with members of the royal family dominated headlines, painting a picture of a woman constantly embroiled in drama. For Sarah, this narrative was both unfair and deeply frustrating. She knew the real Diana, a woman who was kind, compassionate, and fiercely devoted to her sons, William and Harry. The media's portrayal often reduced her sister to a caricature, ignoring the depth and complexity of her character. One of the most poignant aspects of Diana's life during this time was her relationship with her sons. Despite her personal struggles, she remained a devoted mother, determined to give them a sense of normalcy amidst the chaos. Sarah, who had always been close to William and Harry, admired Diana's resilience as a parent. She knew how much Diana's boys meant to her and how their love and support gave her the strength to face the challenges in her life. Yet, even as Diana sought to move forward, the shadow of her marriage to Charles and his relationship with Camilla Parker Bowles continued to loom large. The public's fascination with the love triangle showed no signs of waning, and for Diana, this was a constant source of frustration. She confided in Sarah about her feelings of betrayal and anger, particularly as Camilla's role in Charles's life became increasingly public. For Sarah, these conversations were painful reminders of the hurt her sister had endured. but they also underscored Diana's strength in facing these challenges head-on. The year 1995 was a watershed moment for Diana, as she chose to share her truth with the world in a now infamous interview with BBC's Panorama. Speaking candidly about her struggles, Diana famously stated, "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded." The interview was a bombshell, confirming what had long been suspected about Charles's relationship with Camilla. For Sarah, watching her sister bare her soul to millions was both heartbreaking and empowering. It was a bold move, one that defied the royal family's long-standing tradition of silence. The interview not only highlighted the depth of Diana's struggles, but also signaled a turning point in her journey. It was clear that she was no longer willing to conform to the expectations of the monarchy. For Sarah, this was a moment of profound admiration. She knew how much courage it had taken for Diana to speak out, and she hoped it would mark the beginning of a new chapter for her sister, one where she could finally live life on her own terms. However, the interview also came with its share of repercussions. The royal family was reportedly blindsided by Diana's revelations, and the fallout only deepened the divide between Diana and the institution she had once been a part of. For Sarah, this was a difficult period. She wanted to support her sister, but also understood the delicate balance required to navigate the intricacies of royal relationships. Her role as a confidant became even more vital as Diana faced the challenges that lay ahead. The official divorce between Diana and Charles in 1996 marked the end of a tumultuous chapter in Diana's life. Freed from the constraints of her royal marriage, she appeared to embrace her newfound independence. Yet for Sarah, this freedom was bittersweet. While Diana seemed to thrive in her humanitarian work and personal pursuits, the media's relentless attention remained a constant source of stress. Sarah often worried about the impact this scrutiny had on her sister's mental and emotional health. In the months leading up to her untimely death, Diana's life seemed to be taking a positive turn. She had found love again, was deeply involved in her charitable endeavors, and appeared more at peace than she had in years. For Sarah, this was a source of hope, a sign that her sister was finally reclaiming her happiness. But the events of August 31st, 1997, shattered that hope in an instant. The loss of Diana was a devastating blow to Sarah, who had not only lost a sister, but also a confidant and friend. The grief was compounded by the knowledge of all that Diana had endured during her lifetime. For Sarah, the tragedy of her sister's death was not just the loss of a beloved family member. It was the loss of a life that had been filled with so much potential, yet marred by so much pain. In the years that followed, Sarah dedicated herself to preserving Diana's legacy. She took on a prominent role in charitable efforts that reflected her sister's passions and worked tirelessly to ensure that Diana's story was remembered for its depth and complexity. For Sarah, this was more than just a tribute. It was a way of honoring the strength and resilience that had defined Diana's life. As the world continued to mourn Diana's loss, Sarah found solace in the memories of her sister's indomitable spirit. Diana's journey had been one of triumphs and trials, of heartbreak and hope. For Sarah, the greatest lesson of her sister's life was the power of compassion and the courage to be true to oneself, no matter the odds. The loss of Princess Diana left an indelible void in the hearts of millions, but for Lady Sarah McCorquodale, it was profoundly personal. As Diana's elder sister, Sarah had not only shared her childhood, but also witnessed the unrelenting trials that came with her royal life. In the years following Diana's death, Sarah carried the weight of her sister's legacy while coming to terms with the intricate web of betrayal, heartbreak, and resilience that had defined Diana's story. After Diana's tragic passing, the royal family faced intense scrutiny, not only for their response to her death, but also for the role they had played in her struggles. For Sarah, the aftermath was a bittersweet reminder of her sister's impact. While the world mourned Diana as the people's princess, Sarah saw her as something far more intimate, a sister who had fought valiantly against forces beyond her control. It wasn't long before the public began to shift its gaze toward Camilla Parker Bowles, the woman who had cast a long shadow over Diana's marriage. The narrative surrounding Camilla became one of quiet but growing acceptance, as she transitioned from the infamous other woman to a public figure in her own right. For Sarah, this was a difficult transformation to witness. She had seen firsthand the pain Camilla's presence had caused Diana, and struggled with the royal family's apparent willingness to welcome Camilla into their fold. Over time, Sarah began to speak more openly about Diana's life, offering glimpses into the private battles her sister had endured. While Sarah maintained a respectful tone, her accounts often highlighted the complexities of Diana's relationships, particularly with Charles and Camilla. For Sarah, this wasn't about rehashing old wounds. It was about ensuring that Diana's truth wasn't lost amid the passage of time. One of the most striking aspects of Sarah's reflections was her emphasis on Diana's resilience. Despite the betrayals she had faced, Diana had remained steadfast in her commitment to her sons, her humanitarian causes, and her desire to live authentically. Sarah often spoke of Diana's ability to find strength in adversity, a quality that had inspired not only her family but also the world. As Camilla's role in the royal family grew, culminating in her marriage to Prince Charles in 2005, Sarah's feelings were undoubtedly mixed. On one hand, she recognized the passage of time and the need for reconciliation. On the other hand, she couldn't ignore the profound impact Camilla's relationship with Charles had on Diana's life. For Sarah, it wasn't about harboring resentment, but about preserving the truth of what her sister had endured. In many ways, Diana's legacy became Sarah's mission. She played a key role in preserving Diana's memory, particularly through her work with charities and organizations that reflected Diana's passions. From supporting HIV/AIDS initiatives to continuing efforts in landmine eradication, Sarah's dedication ensured that Diana's humanitarian spirit lived on. For Sarah, these efforts were more than just a tribute. They were a way of giving meaning to Diana's struggles and triumphs. One of the most poignant moments in the years after Diana's death came when Sarah reflected on her sister's relationship with Charles. She acknowledged the complexities of their marriage, noting that while it was far from perfect, it had produced two extraordinary sons. For Sarah, William and Harry were a testament to Diana's love and devotion. She took pride in watching them carry forward their mother's legacy, both in their charitable endeavors and in their personal lives. As the years passed, Sarah found herself increasingly in the role of a guardian of Diana's story. While she refrained from sensationalism, she didn't shy away from addressing the challenges her sister had faced. Her reflections often carried a sense of quiet resolve, a determination to honor Diana's truth without allowing it to be overshadowed by controversy. Camilla's eventual acceptance by the public and her role as queen consort following Charles's ascension to the throne brought Diana's story back into the spotlight. For Sarah, this was a moment of reflection. While she understood the inevitability of change, she remained firm in her belief that Diana's impact could never be diminished. Diana's story, with all its complexities, remained a powerful reminder of the strength it takes to challenge tradition and fight for one's identity. In her later reflections, Sarah often spoke of the lessons Diana's life had imparted. She emphasized the importance of compassion, resilience, and authenticity, qualities that had defined Diana even in her darkest moments. For Sarah, these lessons weren't just a part of Diana's legacy. They were a guide for navigating life's challenges. As Diana's sons continued to build their lives and families, Sarah saw in them the enduring spirit of her sister. William and Harry's dedication to mental health advocacy, environmental conservation, and social justice echoed the values Diana had held dear. For Sarah, this was the ultimate tribute to her sister, a living legacy that carried forward Diana's compassion and courage. In the end, Sarah's journey of preserving Diana's memory became a story in itself, a testament to the enduring bond between sisters and the power of truth in the face of adversity. For Sarah, speaking out wasn't just about honoring Diana. It was about ensuring that her story remained a beacon of hope and inspiration for generations to come. The weight of the past, with all its heartbreak and betrayal, would always linger. But for Sarah, it was the strength of Diana's spirit that prevailed. Her sister's life, though tragically cut short, had left an indelible mark on the world, a mark that Sarah would continue to protect and celebrate for the rest of her days. With that, we have reached the end of today's video. If you have come that far with us, be sure to check out other videos on the channel.